So, hi everybody and welcome back to C++ tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 183 and in this video I want to talk about our exercise one more time. But in my last video I said I would now extend this class and talk all about the other parts. I will not do this in this video because we are not finished with the classes now. There are many topics which we have to talk about classes. And in the next exercise, then I will talk about all the other parts more in detail. But in this video, there is one part which I have not explained very well, and it is very important. And that is the part why we should create variables first in local, then in private, and then in public. This is a very important topic for me, and that's why I explain it for you as well in this video. So let's get started with this and see what I did here in my class in this exercise, what I created here. So you can see my class is very small. I have here one variable, but this variable is public. And when you start creating variables here, you should start creating variables all time from local and then go step by step up to global. What I mean with that, creating by local and going up to global. Very simple. Let's take this variable here. Let's take this one here. I cut this out and put it normally here. Why I put it here? Because that was the first place where I needed it. Here I created this function. Here is the local scope, and this function said I want set this traffic light color, which I created here, to green. That's the job of this function here. But now my job is as a programmer to check if I need this variable outside of this local scope of this function. And that I mean you have to check from local step by step to global. So, and how we do this? So let's do this. So I demonstrate you it. First of all, I have this variable here. I see, oh, it is used here. So with other words, I don't need it outside. So when I watch this class, there is absolutely no need to put it outside of this class right now. When I save this and then I develop my program more, then I see, oh, wait a minute. I need this variable outside of this class. So with other words, I can't keep it here in my local scope anymore, because this variable which I created is not only used here within this class scope, within this function scope, I need it even outside of the class. So then you have to consider this situation and think how you can provide this variable here outside. And the way here is like before, we are putting just a variable to a public. But in general, this is not the way you do this one, because that was already, I developed this one, and that's why I know I need the variable outside. The normal way how you do this is first you start here. Again, let me show you this one. Again, I created the variable there where I needed it. At start, I needed it here, right? And then I check if I need it, if I can keep this variable here in this case. And right now, when I watch just this class, yes, there is no need to call it outside. All right, so there is no there is no problem to call it outside. Then what I do is check for what you can do is you can go here, right click, And check also this one here, find all references if you are analyzing a code, if this variable is used in other places. And right now you can see it's only used here in these two places. Okay, I can keep it here. But let's say this variable is also used in another function within our class. What I mean with that is, let me copy just this function here. At this point, I call this here the number 2, just for fun. And let's say number 2, you can see this traffic light here, which I created here, is now used. Let's delete this one here. Is now used here as well. You can see I am using this here as well. The problem is this one here is complaining now. And the reason for that is we learned this is a local scope. Local scope means this function is hidden at this scope and we need to make it visible. And like I said, we start to make it visible. First we are local. Let's go and make it visible for this other function too. But before we go out to global scope or any other place, we still try to go only one step up. And what is the one step? And this one step here would be not public. This is not the next step. What is the next step here? Actually, the next step would be private. Okay, so, and when I make this private, because private means this access specifier, all other functions or anything else which is defined here within the class can access this variable here. And now you can see this function here has now access to this one and this one as well. And there is no problem. So I went from the local scope to the next local scope of the class here, but it is still local scope of the class. Because the class has normally free access specifier, we have not talked about protected so far. Not protected, what's wrong? All right. So normally we have here free access specifiers, and it goes from private to protected and then to public. So the private means here we are just allowing the variable to be used within this class, and all other things which you define here in this class, if it's a function or anything else, can use this variable now within this class, no problem. But let's say you have to check if this is your final place, and in our case we know, oh, I need this variable really outside of the class. Then you could check if protect is okay. If this is also not okay, you check first. Here we bring it up to protected and see if this is working for our needs. If this is not working for our needs, then okay, I need this variable really using outside of the class. And outside of the class means you have created, for example, an object, a variable name, and then this variable or this object is using this variable here. You can see this one, and that means we need to make it we need to make this variable accessible outside. So that is the last step what we do. Okay, we make this outside. Now I know this variable is used, can be accessed from outside. I can use it, for example, in my demonstration, no problem. And this is the step what you should do as a starter normally. Let's say this is the one good practice, I would say, to make this. And the question is now, wait a minute, would be it so wrong just to start with public? The answer is normally no. It will work too. If you make this one here public from the start, you would have access within the class, you would have access outside the class. There is no problem. So the question is then, okay, if this works so easy when I use just public, why the hell I should start here with a local scope and then check if I go to the private scope and then check if I go to the protected scope and then to the public scope, and who knows, perhaps I go out of this class and make it even in the global scope of the CPP file. So what is the reason behind that? Why we should do this? Why we should make our life so complicated? And now there are different kind of reasons, and I want to show you the one reason which I think it's very important, at least important for me. And the reason is, this one reason is, look what happens when I make this public, right? So I have made this variable here public now, and let's assume we could make this also private. But let's say we have here a public variable, and you can see I have integrated this public variable here, this traffic light, in my code here. That's absolute fine. There is nothing wrong. Absolute perfect. But let's assume you can see here the traffic light class. This is the class. This is the variable public. And now what I do is I create not one class, not one object. Let's say I create here some more objects because I can do it, right? Oh man, that was not a good idea. Why I have here not copied the whole thing. One moment. Let's say I create here many objects. All right. So, okay, what is the problem with creating many objects? There is no problem. There is right now no problem. You can create here many objects, and all these many objects can use now this public variable outside of the class, right? So I can use this object here, this number 2. Here's my traffic. Let me see. This, of course, I can't use it here. I have to use now this word here. Okay, traffic light 2. I use this one here, and you see this variable here is public, right? Here, let's use it. Traffic light, let's make here traffic light color and assign it for anything. I use it here and say here blue. And now I make this copy here so it's faster to demonstrate what I want to demonstrate. And another place in the code, I make this one, the next one. This is my number 3. And I assign it here gray and so on. You get the idea, right? You can copy this one too. And all over the place now you can use your public variables in your code, and not only in this CPP file, perhaps in other CPP files as well. So let's make this one here. So what is the problem? Is there a problem? Actually, there is no problem. That's absolute fine till now. The problem will come now. The problem is, let's say, where is that? Let's say here, I don't know. Let's say here blue again. So so right now you see I have a public variable. I created here many objects. All these objects I used in different places. This objects I used here, this other object I used here, and perhaps I used some of these objects in other CPP files. So is there a problem? Can you see here a problem? Actually, there is right now no problem, like I said before. But let's assume we finish our project. Like in our exercise, we finished our exercise, right? And when I started my exercise, okay, we have anywhere here already a problem. And that is just a multi-definition. Let's make here this one, fun number. And then we start here our exercise. And then you can see, yeah, it works all fine. Nice. And this one works nice. And yeah, you are happy it works all fine. But let's assume that's not the case, because we know that when we are programming, there will be bugs. Like I said, in future, one of the job of a programmer is fixing bugs, right? That you have to be aware of this. This is one of your jobs in the future, and that's why I say don't worry if you make errors. You are just training to fix bugs. That's a very good skill for the future, and you need it as a programmer, because that's a little bit a part of a programmer. So let's assume we are finished with our project and there is a bug, and let's assume this bug, let's say we have a suggestion. So we think this bug is caused by this variable traffic light color. And now comes the interesting part. Because this traffic light color is public, which means it is accessible outside of the class, now as a programmer, I have to go to all objects here which was created with this class here. Then I have to go to all objects where this traffic light color is integrated to other codes. For example, let's assume this is integrated anywhere else. You can see this traffic lights color is integrated here in this if structure, in this cout, and so on. This is one example of integration in other code. And assume you have to assume now that all these other objects are integrated anyhow the same way here, a similar way in other places. And we are thinking that this one variable could cause the error, but we don't know where. Now, as a programmer, you have to go and search all and check out all these places where this traffic light is used. This is a lot of work because this was public, this was available, and now I have to go all the places and check here, check there, check there. Is this the cause? Is this the cause of an error? And this the cause of an error? And you will waste a lot of time to fix this one error. But let's go back to our to the start where I told you it is better to start local and then go global. Let's go back to our global, and we have still this errors. Let's say this time this was not global. Let's say this was, for example, very local, but this is not working right now. But let's assume it was just local. So, and now the same thing here. Let's say we created again with the same class here 1,000 objects. Here I created this object and then this object I integrated in other places. Let's assume there is no error here because let's assume it just for a moment. And all these objects here, yeah, like before, I integrated this code with this traffic light color in all other places. And the point is now here, and I assume again that this traffic light color caused the problem. What I can do is now, because I know this traffic light color here is local within this class to this function, I can skip all other parts in the class here. Perhaps this class had 500 entries, so the class itself could be very, very big. But this one is just a local variable. This is local to this scope. This function is so big. I have just to check this one function here, and I know it if this is the cause of my problem or not. I have not to check other parts. I have not to check all where this class is created and could cause the problem, because the reason is very simple. I used it only here. This is the only place where I used it. I never used it in other places, and this class is not available outside, so I know the class itself, its uses here in this function. That makes the life of a programmer so much easy when you try to fix bugs. If they are, let's say, very local. Let's say, okay, this one was not possible in our case because, let's say, this variable still needs access within the class in other places. Okay, then I said, like the strategy, we go out of this local scope here and put it still not in public and protected. We still put it in private. And the advantage of this is, let's say this traffic light color still caused anywhere problems that was integrated in many codes. You still, if this is the case, you still just check this time, not the function, because now it's not defined here anymore. Now this this variable is accessible for other places in the function too. But the good point is, because it's private, we know this one will be used only within the scope of this class, not in other places. With other words, even this object here is created in many places, this variable is never used in other places, integrated not in other code snippets. You can see this traffic light here is integrated in this code here. You can see I have used a if. The if is using the cout. The cout is calling this one and integrating it. So it's connecting it with this operator anyhow. And now I have all time check this kind of stuff. No, in this case here, I know this is not called outside. So it is still within the class, and as a programmer, I check only, yeah, if this is the only variable which is used within the class, I check only where this variable is used within the class here. Very limited places to check, which is nice for the programmer. I have not to cross all the code in other places, which can cause, again, a lot of work. So, and then after this one, but you have still to check if this variable is needed perhaps in another place. In my case, it is really needed outside. But before outside, you would check first, later, perhaps protected. That is the next step. Let the next scope. And we will learn this here in future, what protected is. We have not talked about this in this video, but after this one, you see, okay, we need indeed this variable outside of the class. And then we are going to do this public, and you can see public is, when you understand what I try to say you, public is all time the worst case normally, because you can now integrate this variable, you can call it outside, integrate it in many places with other codes, and if there is an error, you have just to check the whole other places with the codes which is not related to this variable. So now I have to check this if here, now I have to check this operator, cout operator, how this is working with this call here, if this is there a problem or something else, right? So nothing, it's not within the class anymore. It's much more complicated and depends on where you integrated it. This is still not too complicated, I think, but there are places where they have perhaps this so-called chain reaction, which is one of the worst cases. You see here an error, but this error is caused, I don't know, in another CPP file, 1,000 lines are anywhere else, but you see just the error here, and that will just waste your time, and that's the reason why I talk so much right now about this topic. You should try to avoid this public variables in general, but in this case I can't avoid it. So in my case, for example, when I created this class, I needed this variable outside. For example, in my simulation here, I wanted to use this variable here within this class, which is set in this class. I needed this outside. Then of course you make it public. That's normal. Then you make it, or you can use even a getter and setter if this is better. I'm not sure if this is much better, because but perhaps there are some advantages to do so, but the fact is you still need this variable outside of the class, and that means you will call this outside, right? And then you have no option to say, oh, I would rather make it private, but yeah, that's okay. But I hope you understand what I tried to say you, why it's so important. Start local if it's possible, keep it local, then go to the next step, a local scope, which is here from inner class would be this. I start, for example, with this scope, then I go to private, because then it's still within the class. Then I go to protected, which is within the class, but we will learn that you can inherit this class, and this protected is also considering the other places too. And then you go to the public, which means you can just call it anywhere outside the class. And you should try to avoid this one if it's possible, but of course sometimes you need just variables outside of the class. That's why you make the class. You won't use them anywhere else. Then yeah, These are the little places. So with other words, try to make this variable public, only the places where you really want to call the class the last use case, and that's it. On all other things, try to do within the class. That's the best way to say it. And yeah, I hope you understand this. We have not talked about this much. This is very important for the future, and the reason for that is, like I said, every project will have bugs. There are no projects in the world which has no bugs during the development, which means you will have to fix bugs, which means if you can avoid through good practice, let's say if you can try to limit your work to find these bugs, this is worth doing it, right? That's so my own think about that. So I think if you read this online in C++ book, they will explain this more in detail, why it is a good practice to use local variables. There are other reasons as well. This is only one reason, which I think it's for me very important, because like I said, in future you will also try to fix bugs. And if you can avoid work, which means trying to find these bugs in a faster way, this is one way to find it faster when you follow this rule here, just to try to make them first local and then go to global step by step. All right, with that said, I think I stop this video, and we will continue now with our normal class again, because we have to talk about classes still. There are so many things to talk about classes. And yeah, I hope you did a very good exercise, by the way, and I hope you did a bigger class than mine, where you use this constructor, static, perhaps not static. Static is not good because they have only a very special use cases, I would say. So try to avoid more statics, but use constructors, use, I don't know, const functions and all this kind of stuff, what we talked. If you use them and train them, that was super. That's nice. And now you should consider also, when you create variables, try to create them from local and then go to global step by step and check if you need to make them global. That's the next point. And yeah, like I said, in the next video, we will continue with classes. And like all time, if you have any complaints or any suggestions or anything else, write it in the comments. See you in the next video. Good luck, bye, and like all time, never give up and have fun.